In the elegant restaurant Sky High, on the 40th floor of the Shard in London, Emma Thompson served her last table before her life would change forever. At 27, she had perfected the art of invisibility, 5 years observing the secrets of the powerful without ever interfering. But that November evening, when she saw billionaire James Whitmore's fiancée sending intimate photos to another man while he planned to propose, something broke in her heart. With trembling hands, she whispered into the ear of Britain's richest man a truth that would destroy an engagement and create true love. The next morning, she would discover a gift that would completely rewrite her destiny. Emma knew every shadow, every whisper, every furtive glance that circulated between the tables of Sky High. London's most exclusive restaurant had been her territory for 5 years, where she had learned that waiters were furniture, useful but invisible. That Tuesday evening, she was serving table number 1, always reserved for James Whitmore and his fiancée Victoria Sterling. The 35-year-old billionaire had arrived particularly animated, talking about projects that excited him, while a small velvet box peeked out from his jacket pocket. Emma understood immediately. He was about to propose to Victoria. Victoria, however, wasn't listening to a single word. Her eyes were fixed on her mobile screen hidden under the table, her fingers flying across the keyboard with the urgency of someone living a very intimate conversation. Curiosity mixed with a protective instinct she couldn't explain made Emma slow down while pouring the wine. What she saw deeply shocked her. Victoria was sending explicit photos to someone saved as "My Darling." The messages were unequivocal. They were organizing a meeting for that very night, after dinner. Emma's stomach twisted. James continued talking about his dreams, unaware that the woman he was about to propose to was betraying him just centimeters away. All evening she served mechanically, but her mind was in turmoil. Every smile James directed at Victoria hurt her physically. The proposal came with dessert. James knelt before the entire restaurant, pulled out a ring with a diamond that sparkled like a star, and spoke words of love that moved everyone present. Everyone except Victoria, who accepted with a forced smile while already typing a response to a message that had just arrived. Applause echoed through the restaurant, but Emma heard it as if it came from far away. She saw James beaming, unaware that the woman who had just agreed to marry him was already planning to meet her lover. While serving coffee, she found herself next to James at the exact moment Victoria had stepped away to go to the bathroom. His eyes sparkled with happiness when he looked at her. He whispered words of genuine joy that broke Emma's heart. The words came out before she could stop them, whispered like a breath, while she pretended to arrange the table. She told him to check who his fiancée was chatting with on her phone. The confusion on James's face quickly transformed into understanding when Emma explained in a few words what she had witnessed. She saw the exact moment when his perfect life began to crumble. Victoria returned from the bathroom with her fake smile always plastered on her face. James watched her approach, and Emma knew he would never be able to see her with the same eyes again. The evening ended apparently normally, but Emma knew she had changed the course of 2 lives. As she watched the couple leave, James silent and thoughtful, Victoria already checking her phone, she wondered if she had done the right thing. The answer would come the next day, in a way she could never have imagined. James couldn't close his eyes that night. He watched Victoria sleep beside him in their penthouse overlooking the Thames, her phone still clutched in her hand even in sleep. For the first time in 2 years, he really looked at the woman he thought he loved. At 5 in the morning, he made a decision that would change everything. With the delicacy of someone handling explosives, he slipped the mobile from his fiancée's hands. What he found exceeded his worst fears. Months of messages with Oliver Hayes, a fashion photographer, explicit photos, declarations of love, and future plans together. Even more shocking were the messages from the previous evening. The appointment at a central London hotel, consummated a few hours after she had accepted his marriage proposal. Victoria wasn't just betraying him for months, but was also making fun of him with her lover, calling him the perfect cash machine and planning to divorce after accessing part of his fortune. James closed the phone with trembling hands. In 30 years of life, he had faced business crises and million-pound losses, but nothing had ever hurt him as deeply as discovering that the woman he loved considered him only a means to get rich. He took the £2 million ring from the bedside table, observed it in the dawn light filtering through the large windows, then slipped it into his pocket. He left without making a sound and headed to the office. But first, he had someone to thank. His investigators had gathered all the information about Emma Thompson, 27 years old, lived alone with her Alzheimer's sick mother in a modest flat in East London, had worked at the restaurant for 5 years, never had problems with the law, and most impressively, had refused 3 better-paid job offers so as not to abandon her mother. She was exactly the opposite of Victoria, someone who put family before success, loyalty before profit. Before going to see her, James made 3 crucial calls: to his lawyer, requesting a fraud complaint, to his investigator, demanding all evidence on Victoria, and finally, to his private bank, ordering the preparation of a black card with a £5 million limit in Emma Thompson's name. It was time to prove that there were still people in the world who knew how to recognize honesty and reward it as it deserved. Emma woke at 6 sharp, as every morning for 5 years. The routine was always the same: prepare coffee, check that her mother had taken her medicines, comb her hair, and tell her about the day, even though the woman now only occasionally recognized the daughter who cared for her. While preparing breakfast, Emma thought back to the previous evening. Had she done the right thing, warning James? Or had she only ruined the life of a man who might have been happier in ignorance? Doubt tormented her, mixed with worry about her job. The doorbell made her jump. Who could it be at this hour? She looked through the peephole, and her heart stopped. James Whitmore stood on her landing, elegant even at 7 in the morning, with a bouquet of white flowers in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other. She opened with trembling hands, conscious of her disheveled appearance. Flannel pajamas, tousled hair, no makeup. James observed her with an expression she couldn't decipher. There was gratitude, but also deep sadness. He asked to enter, and she settled him in the small living room, mortified by the modesty of the flat. James Whitmore, accustomed to the most extravagant luxuries, found himself in a 40-square-meter studio with IKEA furniture. James confirmed that she had been right about everything. He offered her the flowers, then the leather briefcase. Inside was a black credit card, different from any she had ever seen, with her name engraved in golden letters. Emma's automatic refusal was interrupted by James's explanation. During the night, he had discovered that Victoria was using him. The marriage was just a way to access his fortune, with the divorce already planned. The card had a £5 million limit. It wasn't a gift, but an investment in her, in people like her. James explained that she had done what 99 out of 100 people would never have done. She had chosen truth, even knowing it could cost her job. He detailed his plans for the day. He would report Victoria for fraud, make all her infidelities public, destroy her career as she was about to destroy his life. But first, he wanted to do something positive. Reward honesty. The card would allow Emma to give her mother the best possible care. Stop working as a waitress if she wanted. Resume her studies. Do what she had always dreamed of. When her mother called from the bedroom, Emma went to attend to her, leaving James alone. Upon her return, she found him standing by the window, watching London wake up. Emma accepted, but with one condition. Part of that money would go to help other people in her situation. Single mothers, children caring for sick parents. James looked at her with an expression Emma had never seen before: respect, admiration, and something that resembled hope. He told her she was the richest person he had ever met. The war between James and Victoria exploded in the British tabloids like a devastating tornado. Within 24 hours, the story of the betrayed billionaire and the unfaithful model became the country's most followed scandal. James had planned everything with the precision of a general studying a battle. The morning after his visit to Emma, he called a press conference at his company headquarters. Before 50 journalists and cameras from across Europe, he presented all the evidence without filters, proof of the betrayals, messages where Victoria boasted of manipulating him, the plan to marry him, then divorce with a multi-million agreement. He declared he wasn't doing this for revenge, but because the public had the right to know who really was the person who had built her career on the image of the perfect woman. Victoria tried to defend herself with tearful interviews, painting herself as the victim of a powerful and vindictive man. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the British public, who had always loved love stories, didn't forgive the cold-bloodedly planned betrayal. Within a week, Victoria lost all her advertising contracts. The fashion brands that had courted her dropped her, her agent abandoned her, sponsors disappeared, and even Oliver Hayes, the photographer for whom she had risked everything, left her when he realized the story would end up in the papers. James wasn't content with Victoria's social ruin. He also had her prosecuted for fraud, manipulation, and blackmail. His lawyers, Britain's best, built such a solid case that the woman risked years in prison. Emma followed the whole affair in the newspapers with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was happy James had discovered the truth. On the other, she felt responsible for one person's total destruction. The black card in her wallet seemed like an enormous weight, but James hadn't forgotten his promise. After settling the Victoria matter, he dedicated himself completely to what he began calling the Emma mission. Without telling the young woman anything, he discreetly had her building's lift repaired, paid a year's rent in advance for all tenants in difficulty, and above all, had all the medical equipment necessary for her mother installed in Emma's flat. Emma noticed when she returned from her shift and found 2 private nurses taking care of her mother. When she learned that an anonymous benefactor had paid for a complete year of assistance, including medicines and experimental therapies, Emma immediately understood who it was. That same evening, she went to James's office, getting past security with a determination that surprised everyone. She burst into his 40th floor office, protesting about what he was doing. James didn't seem surprised to see her. When she protested about the nurses, medicines, and flat improvements, he replied that they weren't gifts, but investments in a person who was worth much more than it cost to keep her happy. Emma began to tremble. There was something in James's eyes she had never seen before. He was no longer the cold and calculating billionaire who had destroyed Victoria. He was a man who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. James stood up and approached the large windows overlooking London. The city glittered at their feet, millions of lights pulsing in the night. He confessed to having spent his whole life surrounded by people who wanted him for what he had, not for who he was.
Enjoying the story? Give it a little like, and don't forget to subscribe. Now then, let's carry on.
Emma was the only person who had told him the truth, even when it could cost her everything. When Emma objected that she was just a waitress living in a studio flat with nothing to offer him, James turned with an expression that made her heart beat faster. He revealed having understood in recent days that he had fallen in love with a waitress who had had the courage to save a billionaire from himself. The words hung suspended in the air between them. Emma felt the world spinning around her. James approached, taking her hands in his. He acknowledged it was too early, that it seemed impossible, but he was only asking for one chance. He wanted to prove to her that not all rich men were like those she had always served at the restaurant, that she deserved all the love in the world. Emma looked into his eyes and saw something that shocked her: vulnerability. Britain's most powerful man was opening his heart to her like a boy in love. She whispered that she would give him a chance. Just one chance. James smiled, and Emma understood that her life was about to change forever. The months that followed were the most extraordinary of Emma's life. James kept his word. He proved to her every day that she deserved all the love in the world, but respecting her times, her insecurities, her world so different from his. He didn't shower her with expensive gifts or drag her into London's jet set. Instead, he learned to know her daily life. He began meeting her at the cafe downstairs to have breakfast together before she went to work. He met her mother and learned with infinite patience to communicate with a woman who lived increasingly in memories of the past. When Emma introduced James as a work friend, her mother smiled sweetly, remembering her boyfriend from school who was called that, and brought her flowers every Friday. James didn't correct the misunderstanding. On the contrary, the following Friday he appeared with a bouquet of daisies, Mrs. Thompson's favorite flowers. Emma watched him talking with her mother, amazed by the kindness with which he treated a woman who often didn't recognize him. James Whitmore, the man who managed multinational companies, spent hours looking at old photo albums with an Alzheimer's sufferer, listening to the same stories repeated 100 times without ever losing patience. But not everything was simple. James's world didn't easily accept Emma. His partners looked at her with suspicion. High society friends treated her with poorly concealed condescension, and gossip papers never missed an opportunity to highlight the social difference between the Billionaire and the Waitress. A weekly magazine headlined about Emma Thompson's modern fairy tale, publishing secretly taken photos of her leaving her council block. Emma bore everything with dignity, but James saw how these attacks hurt her. One evening, he found her on the balcony of the new flat, with a newspaper in her hand and tears in her eyes. The headlines accused her of being a gold digger who had plotted everything to conquer him. James took the newspaper from her and threw it in the bin, asking why she cared what they said. When Emma expressed fear that he too might start doubting, James took her in his arms, feeling the fragility of this woman who had shown so much courage. He reminded her that he had seen her risk her job to tell the truth to a stranger, sacrifice her dreams for her mother, cry over money she didn't have, and smile at life's small joys. How could he doubt her? But the greatest test came when Victoria, already ruined and desperate, made one last attempt at revenge. Through her contacts in journalism, she managed to get an article published accusing Emma of having invented everything to conquer James. The article defined her as a blackmailing waitress, accompanied by compromising photos of Emma at work and interviews with colleagues who, generously paid, told of a girl always interested in rich clients. The article caused scandal. For the first time, Emma found herself at the center of a media storm that threatened to destroy her. She lost her job at the restaurant, was pursued by paparazzi every time she left home, and began receiving hate messages on social media. One evening, after finding a group of journalists outside her home wanting to interview her, Emma suggested to James that perhaps they should take a break. She didn't want her presence to ruin his reputation. James looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. There was fierce determination in his eyes. He declared that if she thought he would leave her for an article written by a woman he had already destroyed once, it meant she didn't know him at all. The next day, James called another press conference, but this time he didn't talk about business or scandals. He talked about love. He told how 6 months earlier, a waitress had saved his life by telling him a truth no one else had had the courage to tell him. Since then, Emma Thompson proved to him every day what it meant to truly love someone, not for what they have, but for who they are. He paused, looking directly into the cameras broadcasting live, declaring that Emma was worth more than all those who wrote defamatory articles about her put together. And then, looking straight into the lens, he asked her to marry him. The live television marriage proposal went around the world. Emma watched it from her flat's living room, surrounded by her mother's nurses and a group of friends who had come to support her. When James returned home that evening, he found her waiting with the ring he had bought for Victoria in her hands. Emma noted it was the same ring. James confirmed it, but explained it wasn't the same man offering it, and above all, not the same woman receiving it. Emma looked into his eyes and saw their entire future together. She accepted his proposal. The kiss that followed tasted of tears, won battles, and a love that had survived every test. James and Emma's wedding was celebrated a year later, in a ceremony that became the symbol of a modern fairy tale. It wasn't the typical billionaire wedding, full of pomp and ostentation. It was a celebration of authentic love, held in the garden of the house James had bought for them in the Cotswolds, overlooking the rolling English countryside. The guests were an extraordinary mix of different worlds. James's colleagues from the technology sector sat beside Emma's waitress friends. Finance magnates shared tables with the nurses who cared for the bride's mother. It was the image of a Britain that still knew how to recognize people's worth beyond appearances. Emma's mother, in one of her lucid moments, was accompanied down the aisle by James himself. During the reception, James gave a speech that went down in history, explaining how Emma had taught him that real love is much simpler and much more difficult than in films. It's having the courage to tell the truth, even when it hurts. The announcement that followed surprised all the guests. James and Emma were about to launch the Thompson-Whitmore Foundation, dedicated to free assistance for families with Alzheimer's patients and economic support for young people who gave up their studies to care for their parents. Emma was appointed president of the foundation with a salary that made her economically independent. James declared he didn't want anyone ever to be able to say his wife depended on him. Emma Thompson was an extraordinary woman who deserved to shine with her own light. The celebration continued until dawn, but the most beautiful moment came when the newlyweds found themselves alone on the terrace overlooking the countryside, watching the sun rise over the English hills. 6 months after the wedding, Emma discovered she was pregnant. The news came on the same day her mother had an extraordinary moment of clarity and recognized James by name, thanking him for making her daughter happy. Those were the last lucid words she spoke before peacefully passing away in her sleep 3 days later, surrounded by the love of her daughter and the son-in-law she had learned to love like a son. The baby was born in spring, a boy they named William, after the grandfather Emma had never known. James held him in his arms for the first time with tears in his eyes, thinking of the miracle that had brought this little life into their existence. Emma watched them from the hospital bed, thinking of the incredible journey that had taken her from a waitress with a broken heart to a happy mother and beloved wife. The evening they returned home from hospital, James found on the bedside table the black card he had given her that first day. Emma had never used it. When he asked her why, she smiled, pointing to the cot where their baby slept, explaining that he had already given her the greatest gift, the possibility of loving and being loved. Everything else was just details. What had begun as the story of a waitress who saved a billionaire had become the story of two people who saved each other, building together a family based on the purest love that exists, one that asks for nothing in return and gives everything without reservation. The black card that had started it all remained unused in Emma's drawer, a symbol not of wealth, but of the moment when honesty changed everything. Sometimes she would look at it and remember that cold November evening when she chose truth over silence, courage over comfort. James would often find her in William's nursery at night, watching their son sleep. In those quiet moments, he would wrap his arms around her and whisper that she had given him something no amount of money could buy, a real family built on genuine love. Their love story became legendary in London's social circles, not for its glamour, but for its authenticity. Business magazines wrote about the Thompson effect, how one woman's honesty had transformed not just a man, but an entire approach to relationships and success. The foundation flourished beyond their wildest dreams. Within 2 years, they had helped over 500 families affected by Alzheimer's and provided scholarships to 200 young carers. Emma's office wall was covered with thank you letters from people whose lives had been changed, just as hers had been that fateful night. On their second wedding anniversary, as they walked through Hyde Park with little William between them, James stopped by the Serpentine Lake. The autumn leaves were falling, just like that November evening when their story began. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, holding her hand as William chased ducks by the water's edge. That night at the restaurant, everything that followed, Emma looked at their son, then at the man who had become her whole world. She thought of her mother, peacefully at rest now, and of all the people they were helping through their foundation. "Regret telling you the truth?" She smiled, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. "James Whitmore, that was the best decision I ever made. It gave me you, it gave me William, and it showed me that sometimes doing the right thing is the only thing that matters." As the sun set over London, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the three of them walked home together, a living testament to the power of honesty, the strength of true love, and the beautiful life that can bloom when someone has the courage to speak the truth, no matter the cost. And in London, at the headquarters of the Thompson Whitmore Foundation, a golden plaque reminds everyone who enters of the principle that inspired everything. Honesty is the only luxury you cannot buy and the only treasure you cannot steal. So, if this story has moved you to tears and restored your faith in true love, smash that like button. Tell us in the comments, do you believe honesty is still valued in today's world? Have you ever had the courage to tell someone a difficult truth that could change their life? What would you have done in Emma's position? Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell for more incredible stories that prove love conquers all. We share real stories of courage, transformation, and hope every week. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in love again. You never know whose life you might change. Remember, sometimes a single moment of courage, a whispered truth, can rewrite two destinies forever. Your voice matters. Your honesty matters. Be the Emma in someone else's story. Drop a heart emoji if you believe in the power of truth and authentic love.